I want to tell you about something that happened to me over the course of 11 months, from the spring of last year through the following February. I've tried writing it down before. 3 times, actually. Each time I stop around the same point, not because I don't remember, but because I reach a section where what I remember doesn't match what I wrote the previous time. And that discrepancy is part of what I need to explain. I'll start with what's verifiable. My name is Callum. In March of last year, I accepted a position as a preservation technician at the Hargrove Collection, a private archive housed on a rural estate approximately 40 minutes northeast of Asheville, North Carolina. The estate sits on 11 acres of densely wooded land at the end of a gravel access road. The main house, a 1920s Georgian revival, serves as the administrative building and reading room. Behind it, connected by an enclosed walkway, is the archive proper, a climate-controlled structure that was purpose-built in 1987 and renovated once, in 2011. Below that building is the lower vault. I'm getting ahead of myself. The Hargrove Collection is a private family archive. It contains manuscripts, correspondence, land deeds, photographic plates, financial records, and personal papers spanning roughly 1804 to 1971. The Hargrove family made their money in textiles and, later, in chemical manufacturing. Their papers were donated to the Collections Trust in 1986, when the last direct heir, Gerald Hargrove, died without children. The trust employs a director, a registrar, 2 conservators, and a rotating team of preservation technicians. That last category was my role. I came to the job from a fairly standard background. Library science degree, 2 years at a university special collections department in Virginia, followed by a contract position digitizing WPA-era photographs for a county historical society. I applied to the Hargrove position because it paid better, offered housing on the estate grounds, and frankly, because I was tired of fluorescent-lit institutional work. The listing described the role as environmental monitoring, material handling, and routine condition assessment of stored items. What it didn't describe was the lower vault. I arrived on a Tuesday in early March. The estate was beautiful in that slightly decaying way that old Southern money produces: overgrown boxwood hedges, a circular gravel drive, shutters that needed painting. The cottage they gave me was about 200 yards from the main house, a small clapboard structure with a kitchen, a bedroom, and a screened porch that looked out into the trees. I liked it immediately. My first 3 weeks were entirely normal. I was trained by the outgoing technician, a quiet woman named Dana who was leaving for a position in D.C. She showed me the environmental monitoring system, the shelving protocols, the pest management logs. She walked me through the upper archive floor by floor, manuscripts on level 1, photographic materials on level 2, oversized items and bound volumes in the rear annex. On my 4th day, she took me downstairs. The lower vault is accessed through a freight elevator at the back of the annex. You need a key card and a 6-digit PIN. The elevator descends 1 level, maybe 15 feet, and opens into a short concrete corridor lit by recessed fixtures on a motion timer. At the end of the corridor is a steel door with a mechanical combination lock. Dana opened it without letting me see the combination, then told me I'd receive it from the director, Martin Cahill, during my 2nd week. The vault itself is a single rectangular room, maybe 40 by 60 feet, with 12-foot ceilings. Climate controlled to 62 degrees Fahrenheit, 35% relative humidity. The lighting is low, deliberately so, for preservation purposes. The materials are stored in acid-free boxes on powder-coated steel shelving arranged in 8 rows. There are 326 boxes in the lower vault. Dana walked me through the space quickly. She told me the materials down there were restricted access, items the trust had determined required additional environmental protection or were considered sensitive for legal or family privacy reasons. Then she told me the protocols. If you're listening to this late at night, the way I think you probably are, if this is the kind of thing you seek out when the house is quiet and everyone else is asleep, then you might consider subscribing to this channel. I don't say that lightly. What I'm about to describe took me almost a year to understand, and I still don't think I'm finished. The protocols were simple. 8 of them, printed on a single laminated card that hung on a hook just inside the vault door. Dana read them to me once, quickly, the way someone recites safety procedures on a flight, not dismissively, exactly, but with a kind of practiced flatness that made it difficult to ask questions. I'll reproduce them as closely as I can remember. 1. Enter the lower vault only during scheduled monitoring windows, 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. daily. 2. Do not remain in the lower vault for more than 20 minutes per visit. 3. Record environmental readings from all 8 sensor stations before departing. 4. Do not open any box in rows 6 through 8 without written authorization from the director. 5. If a box in any row appears to have been moved, opened, or disturbed, do not touch it. Report to the director immediately. 6. Do not read aloud from any material in the lower vault. 7. Do not bring any personal writing, journals, notebooks, loose paper with your own handwriting, into the lower vault. 8. If you hear a sound in the lower vault that does not correspond to the HVAC system, leave immediately and report the time to the director. I remember staring at the card and thinking that protocols 5 through 8 were strange. Not frightening, strange. They had the quality of rules written in response to specific incidents rather than general best practices. Protocol 6, for instance. I'd worked in archives for years. There's no standard preservation reason to avoid reading aloud from documents. Vibration doesn't damage paper at conversational volume. Light does. Humidity does. Not sound. Dana noticed me looking at the card too long. She said, "Martin will explain the reasoning. Some of it's legal, there are sealed materials down here with reading restrictions attached to the bequest." That made sense for Protocol 4. It didn't explain 6, 7, or 8. I asked about Protocol 7 specifically. She paused, then said, "The Hargrove materials are handwritten. Manuscripts, letters, journals." The conservators found that introducing contemporary handwriting into the space created confusion in the cataloging system. Items would get misattributed. It's an organizational control, not a superstition. I accepted that. I wish I hadn't. Not because it was a lie, I think Dana believed it, but because it framed the protocols as practical, which made me treat them practically. Which meant that when I eventually broke one, I broke it practically too. Casually. Without ceremony. That came later. My first 6 weeks were routine. I entered the lower vault twice daily, took my readings, and left. The space was cold, quiet, and still. The HVAC system produced a low, constant drone, the kind of white noise that becomes invisible after 30 seconds. The lighting was dim enough that I used a flashlight to read the sensor displays, which were small digital units mounted at the end of each shelving row. The readings were always stable. Always. In 6 weeks, the temperature never varied by more than 0.2 degrees. The humidity never shifted at all. I mentioned this to Martin during one of our weekly check-ins, and he nodded as though I'd confirmed something rather than reported it. "The system down there is overbuilt," he said. "Gerald Hargrove spent a considerable amount on it. It was important to him that those materials remain undisturbed." I asked Martin, during that same meeting, about the restricted rows, 6 through 8. What was in them? He told me they contained Gerald Hargrove's personal journals and what he called late-period correspondence. He said the journals were under a 50-year seal as a condition of the bequest. They wouldn't be available to researchers until 2036. The correspondence, he said, was with individuals whose families had requested privacy. I asked if anyone ever requested access. He said no. Not once, in the entire history of the collection. I asked if he'd read them. He looked at me for a moment, not with suspicion, exactly, but with a kind of evaluative stillness. "No," he said. "I haven't." I believed him. What I want to describe now is the first deviation. It happened in my 7th week, on a Thursday afternoon. The 4 p.m. monitoring window. I entered the vault at 4:03 p.m. Took readings from stations 1 through 4, all normal. Walked to the back of the room to reach stations 5 through 8, which are positioned along the rear wall, between rows 5 and 8. As I passed row 6, the first restricted row, I noticed that a box on the third shelf was slightly pulled forward. Not dramatically. Maybe an inch and a half proud of the shelf edge, where every other box sat flush. Protocol 5. I didn't touch it. I recorded the observation in my log. Box June 3, 14 displaced approximately 1.5 inches forward of standard position. No visible damage to box or contents. No evidence of unauthorized entry. I finished my readings and left. I reported it to Martin the following morning. He thanked me. He said he'd look into it. He asked me to confirm the box number, which I did. He wrote it down on a pad on his desk. Then he asked, "Did you touch it?" I said no. "Did you look inside?" No. He nodded. Good. Thank you, Callum. When I checked the next morning at 9 a.m., the box was flush with the shelf again. Perfectly aligned. I noted this in my log. A week later, it happened again. Different box. Row 7 this time, July 2, 09. Same displacement. Same inch and a half. I reported it. Martin responded the same way. Thanked me. Asked if I'd touched it or opened it. I hadn't. It went back flush by the next visit. The third time, 2 weeks after that, I started paying closer attention. Not to the box, to the space itself. I stood at the end of row 6 and looked down its length. I counted the boxes on each shelf. I checked their alignment relative to each other. Everything was flush. Everything was perfect. Except row 7, shelf 4, position 12. Box July 4, 12. Displaced forward 1.5 inches. I hadn't walked down that row yet. I was standing at the end of it, maybe 15 feet away. I watched it. I'm aware of how that sounds. I stood still in a cold, dim basement and watched a box on a shelf. But I had 11 minutes remaining in my 20-minute window, and something about the consistency of the displacement, always the same distance, always a single box, always in the restricted rows, had begun to bother me in a way I couldn't articulate. I watched it for 4 minutes. Nothing happened. I logged it. I left. That night, In my cottage, I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet. I entered every instance of displacement I'd observed, including dates, times, and box numbers. 3 entries. June 3rd 14. July 2nd 09. July 4th 12. I stared at the numbers. I'm not a cryptographer. I'm not someone who sees patterns in everything. But I do have a cataloger's instinct for sequence, and these numbers bothered me. Over the next 3 months, July through September, I logged 11 more displacements. Always 1 box per visit. Always in the restricted rows. Always 1.5 inches forward. Always reset by the next visit. Here is the full list. June 3rd 14, July 2nd 09. July 4th 12, August 1st 03. June 5th 11, July 3rd 07. August 2nd 15, June 1st 08. July 5th 02, August 4th 10. June 2nd 06, July 1st 13. August 3rd 01, June 4th 05. 14 displacements across 14 weeks. I tried everything I could think of. I mapped them spatially, no geographic pattern within the room. I looked at them numerically, no obvious arithmetic sequence. I checked them against the Hargrove catalog to see if the box contents shared a subject or date range. I couldn't, because rows 6 through 8 were restricted and I had no inventory list for them. I asked Martin for the catalog data. He said no. Not angrily. Not suspiciously. He simply said, "That material is under seal, Callum. The catalog itself is part of the restricted bequest." I asked if the displacements concerned him. He said, "They're noted." Thank you. I asked if they'd happened before I arrived. He paused. Then, Dana reported similar observations. Yes. I asked if they'd happened before Dana. He didn't answer immediately. He folded his hands on his desk and looked at me with that same evaluative quality, as though he were measuring whether my question was professional or personal. The lower vault has been monitored since 1987, he said. Displacements have been documented throughout that period. By every technician. Yes. And no one has determined a cause. There is no mechanical explanation, Martin said. The shelving is bolted. The floor is poured concrete. There's no seismic activity in this region sufficient to produce that displacement. It's not HVAC vibration, we've tested repeatedly. I waited for him to offer an alternative explanation. He didn't. Continue monitoring, he said. Continue reporting. That's the function of the role. October. By October, I'd been at the Hargrove estate for 7 months. The displacements continued, 1 per week, always in the restricted rows, always reset by the next visit. I logged them all. I stopped reporting each individual instance to Martin and instead submitted weekly summaries, which he acknowledged with a single-line email, "Received. Thank you." Something else began in October. I noticed it first on a Monday morning, the 9 a.m. visit. I was taking my reading from Station 6, which sits at the midpoint of row 7. As I crouched to read the display, I became aware of a sound. Not a mechanical sound. Not the HVAC drone. Something beneath it, or rather, something revealed by the drone in the way a river's current is revealed by a rock. A modulation. A very slight, rhythmic variation in the ambient noise of the vault. I stopped breathing to listen. It was gone. Or it had never been there. I couldn't tell. I finished my readings and left. Protocol 8 says to leave immediately if you hear a non-HVAC sound. I didn't invoke it because I wasn't sure I'd heard anything. A modulation in white noise isn't a sound. It's a perception, possibly imagined. The next morning, same thing. Same location, Station 6, Row 7. The same faint rhythmic quality in the drone. Like breathing beneath static. I held still. I counted. The modulation cycled approximately every 4 seconds. In for 2. Out for 2. I left. I did not report it to Martin. I want to be honest about why. It wasn't because I was afraid of seeming irrational. It was because I had begun to feel, without evidence, without justification, that reporting this particular observation would result in something I didn't want. Not punishment. Something closer to conclusion. As though Martin were waiting for me to report this specific thing, and my report would trigger the end of something I hadn't finished understanding. So I stayed quiet. And I kept listening. Over the next 2 weeks, the sound became more distinct. Not louder, clearer. The rhythm solidified. The cycling became consistent enough that I could predict it. I would stand at Station 6 and feel the air pressure shift microscopically with each cycle, in, out, and I began timing my own breathing to it without meaning to. I don't know when I started doing that. I only noticed I was doing it on the 4th or 5th day. November 12th. 11:42 p.m. I was in my cottage, in bed, reading. The windows were closed. The heat was running, the old baseboard system clicked and ticked the way it always did. I became aware that I was breathing in the same rhythm. The vault rhythm. 2 seconds in. 2 seconds out. I stopped. I breathed normally, irregularly, the way a person breathes when they're not thinking about it. Within 2 minutes, I drifted back to the 4-second cycle. I sat up. I turned on every light in the cottage. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table until 3 a.m., breathing deliberately off rhythm, counting my breaths, breaking the pattern every time I caught myself falling into it. By morning, I was exhausted. I considered, for the first time, whether I should tell Martin. I didn't. Instead, I did something I shouldn't have. I went to the lower vault outside my monitoring window. It was 11:15 p.m. on November 14th. I had the key card, the PIN, and the combination. The building was dark except for the emergency path lighting. The freight elevator hummed obediently. The corridor lights clicked on at my motion. The combination lock yielded. I stepped into the vault. The HVAC was running. The drone was constant. The temperature read 61.8 on the nearest sensor, slightly low, barely outside tolerance. I walked to row 7. Station 6. I stood there. I breathed. And the vault breathed with me. Not a metaphor. Not a subjective impression. The sound, the modulation, synchronized to my breathing. When I inhaled, it swelled slightly. When I exhaled, it receded. When I held my breath, it paused. I held my breath for as long as I could. The vault held with me. 31 seconds. When I gasped, the vault gasped. I left. I ran the length of the corridor, took the elevator, crossed the dark walkway to the main building, stepped out the back door into the cold November air, and stood on the gravel drive breathing in ragged, arrhythmic gulps until my hands stopped shaking. Then I went back to my cottage and opened my laptop. I looked at the displacement data. The 14 boxes. I had been thinking about them as a code, something to decrypt. But standing in the vault, breathing in tandem with something I couldn't see, I began to think about them differently. Not as a message. As a response. What if the displacements weren't the phenomenon communicating with me? What if they were the phenomenon responding to being observed? I pulled up the spreadsheet. I looked at the dates. I cross-referenced them with my monitoring logs. Every single displacement occurred during my 4 p.m. visit. Never the 9 a.m. visit. I'd been entering at 4 p.m. for 7 months. 14 displacements. One every week, consistently, from my 7th week onward. But at 9 a.m., nothing. Not once. The only difference between the two visits was time. Same door, same combination, same route, same procedure. But at 4 p.m., something was displaced. At 9 a.m., everything was flush. Unless the difference wasn't time. I checked my logs more carefully. My 9 a.m. visits averaged 11 minutes. My 4 p.m. visits averaged 17 minutes. I spent longer in the vault in the afternoon. I was less rushed. I moved slower. I lingered. At 4 p.m., I was more present. And something in the vault was tracking my presence, not through cameras or sensors, but through duration. Through attention. Through the quality of my being there. The displacements were never random. They were never a code. They were acknowledgement. December. I stopped sleeping well in December. Not because of nightmares, I didn't dream about the vault. I stopped sleeping because my breathing would synchronize in the dark, and the synchronization would wake me. I'd surface from near sleep with the sudden awareness that my lungs were moving in a pattern that wasn't mine, and the awareness itself would flood me with adrenaline. I developed a technique. I'd breathe in counts of 3, in for 3, hold for 1, out for 3, hold for 1. An 8-second cycle. Deliberately asymmetric. Deliberately mine. It worked. For 2 weeks. Then the cycle shifted. Not mine. The vaults. December 19th, 4 p.m. I entered the vault for my afternoon monitoring. I walked to Station 1. I took my reading. Normal. I walked to Station 2. Normal. Station 3. The modulation in the drone was present, but the rhythm was different. In for 3. Pause. Out for 3. Pause. My pattern. The one I'd invented to break the synchronization. The one I used at night in my cottage. The one I had never performed inside the vault. I stood at Station 3 and listened to the space around me breathe in a rhythm it had learned from my bedroom. I don't remember finishing the readings. My log shows I completed all 8 stations. My log shows I exited at 4:16 p.m. My log shows a notation I don't remember writing. Environmental nominal. All readings within tolerance. Acoustic characteristics stable. No Protocol 8 event. I wrote, no Protocol 8 event. Which means I made a conscious decision, in the moment, that what I was hearing did not qualify. Even though it clearly did. Even though the thing in the vault was demonstrating that it had reached beyond the building, into my home, into my sleep, and taken something from me there. I told myself it wasn't a sound. It was a pattern in existing sound. The HVAC system. Mechanical resonance. There are explanations for sympathetic vibration, for standing waves, for the way enclosed spaces can amplify. I knew I was lying. I knew it the way you know you're lying when you explain to yourself why you're reaching for the drink, or why you're texting the person you shouldn't, or why it's fine, this time, just this once. January. On January 3rd, I broke Protocol 7. I want to be clear, I didn't do this recklessly. I did it deliberately, with purpose, because I had developed a hypothesis and I needed to test it. The hypothesis was this: the vault was learning from me. It had learned my breathing rhythm. It had learned my schedule, my duration, my patterns of attention. The displacements were its responses, acknowledgments of my presence. The sound was its respiration. Its way of metabolizing whatever I brought into the space with me. If that was true, if the vault was learning from my physical presence, then what would it do with my thoughts? With my words? With something written in my hand? Protocol 6 prohibited reading aloud. Protocol 7 prohibited bringing personal writing. Both protocols were about keeping your interior life out of the vault. I wanted to know why. On the morning of January 3rd, I wrote a single sentence on an index card in my own handwriting. Nothing dramatic. Nothing occult. Just a sentence. My name is Callum Edward Mathers, and I am aware of you. I put the card in my back pocket. I entered the lower vault at 4 p.m. I walked to the center of the room, between rows 4 and 5, equidistant from all walls. I stood there. The drone was present. The modulation was present, my stolen 3-count rhythm, cycling steadily. I took the card from my pocket. I held it at my side, face down. The modulation stuttered. Not stopped. Stuttered. Like a record skipping. Like a breath catching. I turned the card face up. The modulation resumed. But faster. Slightly faster. The 3-count compressed, in for 2.5, out for 2.5. I placed the card on the floor, face up, in the center of the aisle. And I left. The next morning, 9 a.m. I entered the vault. The card was gone. Not moved. Not displaced. Gone. The floor where I'd placed it was bare concrete, clean, unmarked. No card. No fiber. No residue. And in row 6, shelf 1, position 1, box June 1st 01, was displaced forward. Not 1.5 inches. 4 inches. I reported neither the card nor the displacement to Martin. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Not because of the breathing, the synchronization had stopped completely. My lungs were my own for the first time in weeks. The air in my cottage was flat and still and ordinary. The relief should have comforted me. It didn't. Because the silence felt like the quiet that follows a question someone else has asked. The kind of quiet where the other person is waiting for you to answer. Patiently. Without pressure. But waiting. January 9th. I entered the vault at 4 p.m. Everything was flush. No displacements. No sound modulation. The drone was flat and featureless. The temperature was 62.0. The humidity was 35%. Perfect. Static. Dead. I felt nothing. The space felt like a storage room. Cold concrete, metal shelving, acid-free boxes. Nothing more. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt the first true fear I'd experienced since arriving. Because the absence was worse than the presence. The presence had been strange, deeply strange, but it had been consistent. It had been responsive. It had demonstrated something like awareness, something like intention. The absence felt like something waiting to see what I would do next. I stood in the center of the room. I said nothing. I wrote nothing. I breathed normally, my own rhythm, irregular and unforced. I waited. 11 minutes. 12. 14. At 16 minutes, I made a decision that I cannot fully explain and do not fully understand. I walked to row 6. Shelf 1. Position 1. Box June 1st 01. I opened it. Inside was a stack of handwritten pages, cream-colored stationery, covered in a small, precise cursive. The hand was old-fashioned, consistent, and entirely unfamiliar to me. I didn't count the pages. 30, maybe. Maybe more. On the top page, beneath a date, June 4, 1968, was a single paragraph. I read it. I won't reproduce it here. Not because I've forgotten it. I remember it perfectly. I remember it better than I remember anything else from that year, better than my drive to the estate, better than Dana's face, better than the combination to the vault door. I won't reproduce it because it was about me. Specifically. By name. Describing the moment I was in, standing in the vault, holding the page, reading those words, in language that predated my birth by 23 years. The paragraph ended with a sentence I'll paraphrase: he will look for the next page in the place where he writes. And he will find it there. I put the page back. I closed the box. I left the vault. I walked back to my cottage. I sat at my kitchen table. I opened my laptop. The spreadsheet I'd been using to track the displacements, the document I'd created, on my personal computer, in my own cottage, had a new entry. Row 16. Column B. In a cell I had never touched, in a format matching my own data entries, was a single sentence. Thank you for introducing yourself. January 15th. I went to Martin's office at 8:30 a.m., before my morning monitoring window. I told him I needed to discuss the lower vault. He looked at me with that same expression, evaluative, patient, unsurprised. Sit down, he said. I sat. How long? He asked. I said, how long what? How long has it been writing to you? I didn't answer. The question contained too much. It confirmed too much. It told me Martin knew, had always known, that the vault contained something that wrote. That communicated. That reached outside itself. Since January 3rd, I said. When I brought the card in. Martin closed his eyes briefly. Not in frustration. In something closer to fatigue. Protocol 7, he said, exists because the lower vault responds to written language produced by its current monitor. The response intensifies proportionally to the intimacy of the content. A name, your name, specifically directed, would have been a significant escalation. I asked what the vault was. Martin said, it's an archive. I said that wasn't an answer. He said, it's the most precise answer I can give. The materials in the lower vault are archival documents. They are genuine. They are old. They are the authentic personal papers of Gerald Hargrove and his correspondence. But they describe things that haven't happened yet, I said. Martin looked at me. Did the page you read describe something that hadn't happened yet? Or did it describe exactly what was happening in the moment you read it? I thought about this. Both, I said. It described the present moment. But it was written in 1968. Yes, Martin said. That's what the archive does. It has always been accurate to the moment of reading. Gerald Hargrove's journals, all of them, describe the experience of whoever opens them. In the handwriting of a man who died in 1986. I asked how. Martin said he didn't know. That no one had ever known. That Gerald himself, in the few late-life conversations the trust director had documented, referred to his journals as correspondence, but never identified who he was corresponding with. I asked whether the archive was dangerous. Martin paused longer than I'd ever seen him pause. Dana left, he said. The technician before her, a man named Ross, left. The one before Ross left. Everyone leaves, Callum. The role averages 14 months. Why? Because the archive learns you. And at a certain point, the distinction between being known by it and being in it becomes uncomfortable. I asked what he meant by being in it. He said, Ross found a page in his own handwriting in a box he'd never opened. Dated 30 years before his birth. He hadn't written it. It was analyzed, the ink was period appropriate. The paper was period appropriate. But the handwriting was his. The content was a journal entry describing his life, not at the Hargrove estate. His childhood. A specific afternoon from when he was 9 years old. January 19th. 4 p.m. I entered the vault. Every box in rows 6 through 8 was displaced. All of them. 4 inches forward. Uniform. Perfectly aligned in their displacement, as though the entire restricted section had exhaled. The modulation was back. Not my rhythm. Not the 3-count I'd invented. Something new. Something faster than human breathing. A pulse, quick and shallow and continuous, like a small animal's heartbeat magnified through the infrastructure of the building. I walked to the center of the room. I said, out loud, violating Protocol 6 for the first time, "What are you?" The pulse stopped. Every box slid back flush. Simultaneously. I heard it. The collective whisper of cardboard against steel, 326 boxes moving in the same instant, a sound like the entire room sighing. Then silence. True silence. The HVAC drone, gone. The hum of the lighting, gone. My own breathing, the only sound in the room. And from the center of the space, from somewhere that was neither the walls nor the ceiling nor the floor but the air itself, the temperature itself, the stillness itself, I heard my own voice say, "Yours." Not a recording. Not an echo. My voice, produced from no throat I could identify, speaking a single word in a tone I recognized as mine but had never used. February 4th. I turned in my resignation. Martin accepted it without argument. He thanked me for my service. He asked only one question. Did it ask you to leave? I said no. I said I was choosing to leave. He nodded. He didn't look like he believed me. I'm not sure I believed myself. I packed my cottage in 2 days. I loaded my car. I drove south on the gravel road, through the gate, and onto the county highway. I'm in Knoxville now. I've been here 3 months. I have a new job, Digitization work for a regional museum. Normal work. Quiet work. No vault. No protocols. But here's what I haven't told anyone. The thing I'm telling you because it's the middle of the night and you're listening and I need someone to know. My breathing is wrong. Not synchronized. Not rhythmic. Not matching anything. It's wrong in the opposite way. It's too independent. Too deliberate. Every breath I take feels chosen rather than automatic. As though the autonomic process that governs respiration has been replaced by something that simulates it perfectly but requires a decision, each breath, individually, specifically selected. I breathe fine. I sleep fine. My lungs are healthy. A doctor would find nothing wrong. But I am aware of every breath. Every single one. And sometimes, not often, not regularly, not in any pattern I can track, I am aware that I am about to take a breath, and there is a microsecond of hesitation. A gap. A space where the breath should begin automatically and doesn't, where I must reach for it deliberately, where the machinery of my body waits for something like permission. And I cannot determine whether I am the one granting it. Last week, I opened my laptop to update my resume. The spreadsheet was still there, the displacement tracker I'd made during my time at the estate. I hadn't opened it in months. There was a new entry. Row 17. Column B. In my own handwriting, which is impossible, because it was typed, everything in that spreadsheet was typed, but somehow visually, unmistakably, in my handwriting. I am keeping you. I closed the laptop. I'm still breathing. I don't know whose decision that is.